Hi folks, Uncle Griff's Golden Age Comics here. Now, I know I'm primarily known as a war book collector, and that's true. I like war books and I like them predominantly over most other stuff. I don't really collect superhero books. But what I really like to collect more than anything are books with stories behind them. And I wanted to do a bunch of story stuff on this channel. One of the books that I had been looking for a very long time, I was finally able to pick up this week. So I figured I'd do a little bit of an episode on that book and see how you like it. Now, this is a regional story, so you got to understand and take it with a grain of salt. Up here in the northern part of the state of Nevada, we always have an inferiority complex towards the southern part with Vegas. They're well known. We're the second city, the second region. We're just always playing second fiddle to those guys. But today, I want to talk to you about this book. This is Reno Browne, number 50. Do it on this side. There we go. This is from Timely Comics, April 1950. Was formerly Margie Comics. That's why they started the numbering system at 50. In the Golden Age, they didn't look at numbering systems the same way they do today. Today, they know if they put a number 1 or first issue on a book, they're going to sell more copies of it. In the Golden Age, they looked at it differently. What they thought was people are looking for stability in a title, so they want the higher number. So they would just roll over the title number from one series to another. This was formerly Margie Comics and became Reno Browne. The internal art on that's by Russ Heath, by the way. A couple notes on that. It's a semi-rare book. There's only 5 in the census, and oddly enough, it's not in Gerber's price or Gerber's Photojournal's Guide to Comics. Don't know why. Don't know how Ernie missed that one. But I figured I'd tell you a little bit about Reno Browne and her history and why I think that book is cool. It tells a little bit about the story of our region as well as some of the comic stuff. So, Reno Browne was born Josephine Ruth Clark to John Robb Clark and Moss Clark on April 20th, 1924. John was a successful divorce lawyer, and after the Great Depression, our state kind of had trouble funding things, so they were trying to find different businesses that they could do. And one of the big businesses we had out here, believe it or not, was divorces. Our state was one of the very first to offer no-fault divorces. You could fly in here and stay for 6 weeks and get a divorce for any reason you wanted. The only stipulation, you had to be here for 6 weeks to declare residency before you could file for divorce. So he made quite a bit of money on that. They lived in a beautiful, just gorgeous, and I'm going to show you a picture, Spanish-style home. It was one of the first homes, Spanish-style mission home, one of the first homes in our area that had a pool. That doesn't sound like a big deal today, but back then, in the 30s and 40s, it was a huge deal. Uh, Reno, as a child, she loved to play piano and practice ballet. She loved horseback riding and won many trophies for her horsemanship. She was the first rodeo queen of Reno. We do rodeos every year since 1945, and since 1945, they've not skipped a year. Reno was the very first one winning in 1945, not only showing off her beauty, but her roping and riding skills as well. She even rode her horse through downtown Reno for the parade. She spent a year at the University of Reno before deciding to head off to Hollywood, where she was going to study acting for a while. While she was there, she decided to become a pilot and a member of the Civil Air Patrol and a spokesperson for the Civil Air Patrol. She also learned a couple new Western skills while she was out in California. She learned the arts of the bullwhip and practiced knife throwing. So while other people were taking acting classes, and she did take some acting classes, she was practicing knife throwing. She started in Hollywood as a stunt woman doing trick riding, and eventually she hired an agent, and that agent later found a producer who was looking for a gal who could ride a horse opposite Johnny Mac Brown in a local B Western for Monogram Pictures. The lady they hired originally for the role, the first day on set, she got on one side of the horse and immediately fell off the other side, and the producer had had enough of her before she even started, and they started looking for somebody else. They hired Reno Browne. Her first movie was in 1946. It was Under the Arizona Skies. Kind of a funny little thing about her. She did 6 movies with Johnny Mac Brown, and they didn't want there to be any confusion about their relationship. So when she did movies with Johnny Mac Brown, they made her change her name in the titles to Reno Blair. So she's titled as Reno Blair in those movies, so there wouldn't be any confusion about whether they were related or daughter or wife or what have you. But the other funny part of that is Johnny Mac's horse was named Reno. So they made him change the horse's name to Rebel. I think they could have just kept it a little simpler, but that's what they did because movie theaters or movie studios and they're going to do what they do. She did 13 total films, other than the 6 that she did with Johnny Mac Brown. The rest of them she's titled as Reno Browne. Some of the movies that she appeared in: Riders of the Dust, Rangeland, Fence Riders, Shadows of the West, West of El Dorado, just 13 total, from 1946 to 1950. Now, the movies back then, they are basically what we would consider B movies of today. They were titled 8-day wonders because they could make them in 8 days, and most of the time the budget was around $50,000, so it was real low-end stuff. There were times they even filmed two movies at the same time. So she would run in one door, change costumes, and run out the same door so that they could shoot it for 2 different films, different costumes. She did 6 movies with Whip Wilson. I'll show you some Whip Wilson comics. And one with Jimmy Wakely, who was the last of the Singing Cowboys, by the way. Of course, one of the prominent things that movies did to sell these movies to fans were Western comic books. And one of the things I learned when doing research on this was that the movie theaters would actually hire studios to do comics of their favorite Western stars to promote the movies. So if they had a movie coming out with Lash LaRue, there would be Lash LaRue comics coming out. So it made them not consistent, but there would always be titles coming out for those. Reno had 3 issues produced under Marvel Comics or Timely Comics under her name, and appeared in a cover of a few others, such as Western Life Romance and Western Love. I'll put some pictures there so you can see those. Interestingly enough, I learned when I was doing my research on this, there were only 2 female Western actresses that had their own comic book: Reno Browne and Dale Evans. Now, everybody's heard of Dale Evans, at least I hope you have. And they were both kind of vying for the title of Queen of the Westerns. I kind of think Dale Evans might have won that, and she might have had a leg up with Roy Rogers there on the side, but just saying. Reno also did a 13-part radio show titled Reno Rides the Range. And one of the cool things they did with this is when she was going to fly to a city to do a promotional appearance, they would forward this 13-part radio series to the city that she was going to appear at, and the radio would broadcast those before she showed up so that she could show up with a little more popularity. I thought that was interesting. Not many people did that, created their own radio show just for promotional purposes. She used to joke all the time that she got 3rd billing behind the male lead and his horse, then her. And if you look at the titles, you're going to see that's pretty much true. Now, one of the interesting things, speaking of horses, is she had a $6,000 horse, and this is in 1950, 1949-ish money, big bucks, Palomino named Major. Major was such a beautiful horse that the studios wouldn't let her use him in movies. They were afraid that it would outshine the other horses, the lead man horses. So she had to use a lesser horse because they didn't want it to show up the leading man's horse. A couple other things, some of her publicity stuff. Bill Haley and the Comets, before they were that, were Bill Haley and the Saddlemen. And they recorded a couple songs for her, My Sweet Little Girl from Nevada and My Palomino and I. That's interesting. You don't hear much about those guys anymore, but if you're a rock and roll fan, you better dang well know who Bill Haley and the Comets are. One of my favorite Reno Browne stories is she walked into a post office one day and got like 16,000 stamps or some crazy number, and was trying to argue with the postmaster because she wanted to mail herself to New York because it was cheaper than trying to buy an airplane ticket. So she figured she'd just put herself in baggage, but they didn't let her do that. She spent most of her career trying to convince the studios they were missing out on not having a female lead in Western films. They argued with her about it, and of course she lost because this is the 50s. They told her, well, you can't have a woman getting hit by men, and nobody wants to see an action star that's a woman. Uh, if you think about today and all the action stars that are women, such as Laura Croft and those type of titles, I think she might have been on to something. She wanted to just have a positive role model for the young girls that were into westerns. Between that and the advent of TV and that type of stuff, Roy Rogers and those type of TV shows, I think that kind of ended her movie career. She kind of ticked off Hollywood and didn't get into TV that much. Today, if you happen to drive through Reno, well, not this year, but next year when you happen to drive through Reno, you can go visit the Nevada Historical Society. And in the Nevada Historical Society, they have a display for Reno Browne. They have her gun belt and her guns there. The museum is closed, but when they open next year, I intend to take this book and donate it to them, because the copy that they've got of Reno Browne's comics is number 51. It's kind of ratty. I mean, it's bad, so they don't have a proper book there, and I think they deserve to have one. Later in life, in 1962, after their basically Western days were over, she married Lash LaRue. They even appeared together in kind of a weird movie. It's kind of an exploitation film called Please Don't Touch Me. It was her final film. In 1984, she had an appearance on Johnny Carson, and she also got to meet, in 1984, John Paul II, the Pope. She got to meet the King and Queen of England. She was well-traveled, got to go all over the world. I think one of my favorite stories about her is maybe not something that anybody else would think, but I do. Back in the day, in the late 80s and the 90s, Reno used to have a home tour where you could drive by and visit, if you get approval to, the famous homes of Reno. And her home growing up as a kid was one of those homes. Well, they had closed her home down for the tour part because they were doing some remodeling. But one day the owners got a knock on the door, and it was a little old lady who introduced herself as Reno Browne. She said she was the little girl that grew up in that house. She spent the afternoon with the family sharing stories about growing up there, and she shared photos of the place from when she lived there. Honestly, I think that she just kind of wanted to go home one more time to the place that she was happiest. It wasn't too much longer than that. As a matter of fact, on May 15th, 1991, she died of cancer. She never had kids. She wasn't married when she died. And today, she's buried under a simple grave marker overlooking the city of Reno. It seems poetic to me. She's keeping an eye on her namesake. Anyway, guys, that's my Reno Browne story. Kind of hope you enjoyed it. I could have told a lot more about different parts of that, but I'm trying to keep them a little bit shorter. And let me know if you liked it. Great, we can do some more. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask you guys an opinion on some things that I've got. I've got to decide what I want to do on my next video. So I'm going to give you some choices, and you can list below what you want to see the most next, and I'll do that as my next long form video. So this is Copper Canyon, and I wanted to tell the story of Hedy Lamarr. And to be honest with you, I've had a lot of trouble writing this script. I've written it, finalized it, deleted it about 3 times. It's not a happy story. I'll warn you ahead of time. She wasn't necessarily a nice person in real life. Very quotable, gorgeous, but a little bit mean. This is Boots and Boondocks. This is Ritter and Gavoy. I'm trying to decide which one I want to do before and which one I want to do on Veterans Day. This is going to be a whole series on boot camp comics, so if you're interested in a story about boot camp comics and the military experience in boot camp, I can do that. That's choice 2. Choice 3, I've been debating whether I want to tell this story because other people have told it. Though I think it's a great story because you can tell it in so many ways. You can tell it as a story of opportunity seized, opportunity missed. You can tell it as a story of children neglecting their father's legacy. You can tell it as a story of racism. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to tell this story, and that would be using this book and telling the Mile High Collection story from Chuck and how he found the greatest collection of all time. And finally, the last choice I'm going to give you would be a family history story and the most valuable piece of paper I own, which I'm not going to show you. I'm going to save that piece of paper for when I do this episode. And that would be this book here, Roar, Rhine, Roar, and the story of the 310th Infantry Division. It tracked their day-to-day combat through World War II. Not a comic book, but it would explain to most people why I collect military comics. Anyway, that's what I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys around soon. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Give me some feedback. Definitely tell me which of those 4 stories you want me to do next, and that'll be my next long-form comic. As always, you guys can catch me on Comic Book Church on Sunday mornings on Bleeker's channel, and I'll put a link down below for you. Have a great day. Uncle Griff, signing off.